Hello, and welcome to the SaWGuy podcast.
Like scary movies? What's your favorite scary movie?
Here's Johnny.
We'll tear your soul apart.
The boogeyman is real, and you found him.
Game over, man. Game over.
What do you want?
I want to hear you scream.
From the front time, bitch!
Welcome to the SaWGuy podcast. As always, I'm the SaWGuy, bringing you episode 19 on It. As you can see, I had to bring my red balloons. Do something a little cool with it, right? Little funny note. I tried to do a teaser, but I guess you all have heard this thing about people dressing up as clowns and how people don't like that. Yeah, it didn't go down. So, but anyways, thank you for tuning in and joining me for this episode on It. Now, I know from the teasers, everyone's been asking me, are you doing the remake? Are you doing the original? Which part of It are you doing? Well, I'm going to talk about the TV miniseries It. I know the new one that just recently came out. Obviously, that's a remake. The jury's still out on that one, honestly, in my opinion, because I don't want to make a podcast episode on it if you haven't seen part 2, because part 2 is not released yet. So, maybe later on, next year when it's supposed to come out, I guess, in 2019. But for right now, we're going to talk about the original Pennywise. We're talking about the Tim Curry, the classic one, right? So, anyways, with the story of It all started because of Stephen King. One of the greatest writers of horror of all time, one of the top. He made this story, obviously in book form, and it got so popular, they decided to do a movie, right? So when they did the movie, and they decided to do this movie in 1989 is when they filmed it, and it was released in 1990, around that time frame, right? So you got to remember, back in the day, they didn't have straight to DVDs. Well, not straight to DVDs, straight to video stuff. I mean, they had a couple, but not a whole lot. And it was more popular than being straight to a video, but not enough to do a theatrical release. So when you're in the middle, what do? Well, they said, fuck it, we're going to go ahead and do it as a TV-made movie. So they did it as a TV-made movie. And ABC was the one that did it, and they premiered it, I think, somewhere in November, like right after Halloween, which was kind of odd, right? For a Stephen King film, you think they released it for Halloween, but they didn't. But anyways, they released it in November, and it's obviously the TV, I was going to say show, but the TV movie, it's actually close to almost 4 hours long, because I think they split it up into 4 different parts. And then when they released it on DVD and movies, they had like 2 parts to it. Even if you go and shop at like the $5 bin or whatever for the movies, you'll see it's like dual screen. It's dual layers. So you put in one layer, you watch the kid version, pull it out, you flip it over, and then you have the adult version. It sounds weird, like a porno, but it's not. I don't know why the hell that came in my head, right? But anyways, this movie was done by Tommy Lee Wallace. A lot of people don't know who Tommy Lee Wallace is, so let me tell you, give you a little backstory like I always do. Tommy Lee Wallace, he was one of the proteges of John Carpenter. So he directed Halloween 3. He did some work on The Fog. I know he was the main pirate guy that you see in like the pictures, the stills and everything. He was the main pirate guy. And then he also directed this movie, which was really good. And he's also a sound guy. He did all the sound bites for Halloween 3, the Happy Halloween song and everything. And it was kind of interesting to figure out that he was the one directing it. But, his take on it was really good. But with this version of it completely doesn't follow the book. It doesn't give the book justice. And what I mean by that is the fact that he didn't read the book until after he finished the movie. So a lot of people, they didn't know about this until after they saw the movie and like, what the fuck? There's nothing in the book. There's stuff based on the book, but it doesn't follow it like verbatim. You know what I mean? And obviously, if we've read the book, we know about the big orgy sex scene and everything, so we don't have to bring that in. Controversial shit. This is a horror podcast, right? So he didn't read the book. He decided, okay, I'll direct the movie, and he directed it. And when he directed it, he did all these different takes in it. So if you've seen the TV miniseries, you know what I'm talking about. The movie's kind of jumbled all over the place a little bit. But it was great for its time. So the whole movie starts. I'm going to break it down like I always do, the whole movie and everything real quick. The whole movie starts where you see this kid, and it shows all the credits, and it shows like the old town of Derry. And the kid stops, and then you hear, Pennywise laughing, right? The kid's looking through and sees all these sheets, and then he just comes out in monster form and just grabs her. They don't show anything. And then the mom says, hey, don't scare mama like that. I'm going to come out and, where you at? Where you at? Right? The mom sees the tricycle tipped over, and then she starts screaming, and then it zooms into the tricycle wheel spinning. So they don't show any of the violent scenes. And I love that method because Tommy Lee Wallace got that method from working with John Carpenter so long. And it goes with that method. And I'm going to beat it like a dead horse in this episode. Less is more, right? Why is less is more better? Because it lets you think of your imagination. And when your imagination runs wild, that's some crazy, scary shit for most. My mind is always crazy as shit. But anyways, afterwards, the police get there and everything. And then you see Mike, one of the characters. He's, obviously we all know this movie. But for the ones that don't know, Mike, he's older now. And he's one of the, Lucky Seven. They used to call him the Loser Club in the book. But in the movie, they said Lucky Seven. So he's having suspicions that something's going on, right? He's asking the police and everything. And then the chief gets involved and said, well, hey, you're the librarian. I'm the chief. So get the fuck out. And he thinks nothing of it. But there's all these rash of, children being abducted, missing, they're murdered. And then he finds the clue of Georgie. And it was Bill's younger brother. That's when he knew, like, oh shit, Pennywise is back. And so this movie, it's based off the book, but it follows a different pattern to it. But the pattern that it takes is very unique, very different, because it's basically, you skip all of the kid stories and how they had like the summer and they had fun in 67 and everything. But it takes on to where Mike has his suspicions and he starts calling everybody up saying, hey, it's back. You're going to keep up on your promise. You're going to come back to Derry. We're going to handle this shit, And as he's calling everybody, it shows, everybody as they're older, what's going on in their life. Like it shows Bill. Obviously, he's the main character. And Bill's played by, I was laughing because somebody on Twitter is like, fucking John Boy, Yeah, he was John Boy in the Waltons. We all know. But anyways, I think his name was Richard Thomas. He plays Billy, so he's writing horror movies and everything. Well, not horror movies. Horror books, horror stories, right? He gets the call when his wife calls him for dinner, and that's when he starts having flashbacks of everything, right? Then it follows to the other different characters, and you find out what's going on in their life later on. You find out that Ben, he's very successful. He was the bigger kid that everyone fucked with. He becomes successful and becomes an architect, and then he's kind of on the wild streak. He drinks a lot, parties a lot, doesn't give a shit about anything, and then he gets the call and starts freaking out. But, we all find out what happens later, how he shows up still, And then you find out the other stories of what's going on with Eddie, with Richie. And as they're all old, they get called back to go to Derry. They're basically, it shows flashbacks of when they were kids. And then, so it's... So you see everybody's perspective on what happened in the 60s as they took on it, right? Or Pennywise. I call Pennywise it because in this movie, they never really explained what Pennywise was. Was he a monster? Was he a fucking spider? Because the ending was kind of just, that was the only thing that sucked about it. It was a big old spider, and there was no climax or anything with it. But back to the whole, can't even talk. Back to what I was saying, though, is when they were calling everybody up, or when Mike was calling everybody up, everybody was basically telling their whole side of the story. And then the first part ends when he calls Stan, and Stan, he was the character who was the Boy Scout in the movie. He didn't want to believe it. He tried to forget it. He gets the call at the end of the first part of the movie, of this, TV series. And he says, yeah, I'll be there. I'll be there. Then it talks about his side of the story, how he never really wanted to go down in the sewers. He didn't really want to go and fight Pennywise. And he was the one who got fucked with the most from Pennywise. And he tried not to believe it, but, it's seeing who's believing. So the end of the miniseries basically ends with Stan going into the bathtub, and he slits his wrist, and he kills himself. And that's the end of part 1. So part 1 was just all the flashbacks and everything, all the build-up, what they had to endure, how they had to deal with their bully, Henry Bowers. And then part 2 starts. Part 2 starts as they're all adults, they all meet up, they all have, little by little, they all meet up and start feeling this weird force around them. Like they're not supposed to be there, or that Pennywise is afraid. And then later on it goes into the whole story of how they all come together. And then Henry Bowers, they don't say much about him other than the fact that he admitted to all the killings when they were kids. And so everything had ended. And this is 30 years later when they're adults. And then they start talking about okay, well, it's every 30 years, there's a disaster in Derry. And Mike knew the whole time, even when he was a kid. They explained that. And later on, Henry Bowers, he gets help from Pennywise to escape. And when he escapes, he goes and then he stabs Mike. And then at the same time, he stabs himself by accident. Dies. Then it ends up being Eddie, Billy, Ben, Beverly, and Eddie. Well, I said Eddie. Did I say Eddie? Yeah, I said Eddie. And Richie. They all decide to go down the sewers. They see Pennywise. They follow him down to his little lair. He comes out as a spider with the deadlights. And then Emily. Why did I say Emily? I meant Beverly. Beverly shoots the slingshot with the silver. Knocks it out. They go and pull the heart out. End of the movie. But there's a lot of little subplots into it. I know I went really quick on this because most of the time I've drawn out. I've done episodes where I've drawn out the whole freaking movie and then I didn't give you my points on it. But I know most of us have seen this one. And it still holds up. And the reason why it still holds up is because the phenomenal acting of the great Tim Curry. Tim Curry, I thought it was interesting because when I was doing my research, he's afraid of clowns. He has a phobia of clowns. And the only reason why he did this film is because they put it in his contract that there shouldn't be any mirrors near him when he's in makeup because he fucking hates clowns. I thought that was interesting. And then yet he played a clown in it, Other little tidbits in the film is that, they played into different things. Like they played a lot into Beverly's character, how her father was abusive. I know in the book it's different. I know in the remake it's different, how there was a little bit of closeness, if you catch my drift. But this one didn't really play on to that. This one, obviously, they had to tone it down for TV. They showed that he was more just like an asshole father than anything, And then when they started showing her adult life, she ended up being with somebody who was exactly like her father. And she broke away from that. And the good thing about this whole movie, well, not the good thing, but the curious thing is just they carried on the whole curse. So, there's a lot of stuff that they based off the original story. And they could have did it so much better if they read the book, if they knew more about the story. But I'm not knocking on it. Honestly, I enjoyed it. I still enjoy it to this day. A lot of people don't like it because it's long and drawn out. But if you've ever read any of Stephen King's books, a lot of his books, they're kind of long and drawn out. But they're long and drawn out because they explain every little thing. It all falls into the Stephen King universe. And this isn't some fan theory bullshit. This is actually confirmed from Stephen King that everybody in all of his stories are all connected. And I thought it was kind of interesting because they were talking about, who was it? Mike's dad was in the military. They said that. That's how he was able to get that book of pictures and everything of Derry. And well, anyways, his dad was in the military with Dick Halloran, who is the chef from The Shining. Crazy, right? I didn't buy into it, and then, doing my research, I was just tripping out about the fact of, what the fuck? And then Stephen King even confirmed himself that everything's all tied into this whole Stephen King universe. So I thought that was pretty cool, This was the first film that kind of confirmed it, the TV-made version. So it was pretty interesting on that, Other little tidbits in here is that they originally didn't want Tim Curry. The original the original person that they wanted to play as Pennywise, right? Y'all are going to trip out on this. I tripped out on this. It was what the fuck? They wanted Alice Cooper, of all people, to play Pennywise. And I can see that, because he can rock the makeup pretty good, but he just doesn't have that creepy edge, Tim Curry, what was good about him in this film is that he basically had that creepy edge. He had that British sense of, how do you say it, like formality. He was very proper and stuff like that. But he also could play like the old time kind of characters, like Pennywise. He was more from like the 1900s. Well, no, in the movie they said it was 1700s. I know in the book and everything else. I'm getting them all mixed up because there's so many different variations of this, right? But anyways, he could play that character really well and just run with it. I mean, if you look at all the other roles that he's done, he was in Legend, he was in a bunch of other films, and he played these crazy roles. I mean, he did them really fucking good, and for him to play a clown was like, whoa. And because of this movie, a lot of people are still fucking afraid of clowns. And I get it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not afraid of clowns. Don't get me wrong. But I can see why people are afraid of it. Because of the fact that clowns are supposed to be happy. They're supposed to be joyful and things like that. But you never really know, like, the creepy side of it. And then when this film came out, I know what was going on. In the 90s, I think it was late 80s, early 90s, that's when the whole John Wayne Gacy shit was kind of like blowing up a little bit. The different things of what was going on and how he had his persona as Pogo and stuff like that. So when all that was going on, obviously there was more fear for it. And being shot back in the day in the 90s or late 80s, they didn't have high quality cameras. So a lot of it, if you watch it on Blu-ray or TV now, it's all HD. So, I mean, that shit looks cheesy, right? But if you watch it on full-on VHS or the old quality TVs with the cathode ray tubes, it looked believable, It looked more like a documentary kind of thing where they were explaining things and they're reenacting it. And that's what made it scary for a lot of people. The fact that, also, too, in this film, what I enjoyed about it the most is that Tommy Lee Wallace, he did a good job of doing the less is more method, where you build up, like, they show the scene where Georgie and Pennywise meet, but then when he grabs his arm and says, "You'll float too," pulls him down, it just shows Georgie screaming, then it shows his face going, zooming in into the camera, which, that's creepy for me because, your imagination could run wild on that shit. It really can, But overall, I mean, for this movie... I know I got this movie requested in for the fan episode too, so I figured I'd give you all a treat, throw a bone out there, do this episode, right? But I thought it was interesting. There was a lot of different takes on this film. And then I haven't even gotten to the acting, right? Not the kid actors, but every one of the adult actors, get this, they were all at least nominated or at least won an Emmy. So that means they had some good acting on there. They had actors with good chops. Some of them... they were hit and miss, and I'm going to tell you why they were hit and miss, because some of them were on the downfall, like Richard Thomas. He was trying to break away from that whole John Boy thing from the Walton. You had John Ritter, who was in Three's Company, and he did another couple of comedy sketch movies, but nothing really big. But this movie really kind of put him in the spot. And then also, I think his name was Harry Anderson. He recently passed away, which sucks, but he was real big on a TV show, and it kind of really pushed his career a little bit more. And he was also in Creepshow, which is another horror movie. Interesting enough. But, this movie, it really kind of propelled a lot of the actors into it. Obviously, we know Tim Curry and what he's done. I've already, gone on and on and on about him. But the interesting thing with everything in this film is just, how do you make a movie without ever reading the book? It's just, it blows my mind. Mind blown. And then to actually be able to do it pretty decent, if they were to make a movie now based off a book, which is every fucking movie now these days, but if they did it without reading the book and understanding the story and all the little inner concepts of everything, it wouldn't be as good. But this movie still has held up since 1990, and we're in 2018, so about 28 years, it still holds up pretty well, And it was so popular, obviously they'd done the remake. They're working on part 2 of the remake as the adults and everything right now. But when the remake came out, they did everything different compared to the original. And this episode isn't all about the remake. It's more or less about the original. But touching on the remake, since I brought it up, this remake, they did it more where you see everything of the current, what's going on. So there's no flashbacks of them being an adult and then flashbacks when they were kids. I think that was the biggest mistake that they did in this film, was because in the book, it doesn't really get in too much into that. It just basically goes right into how everything was when they were kids, and then later on is their adult life, you know? And obviously there's all that controversy with the book and everything, but the TV version, obviously they had to tone it down. Obviously it's meant for TV. The only thing on the TV version of this film, of it, that was really where it pushed the envelope a lot, and I noted this back in the Stephen King episode 2, and I also noted it in the Clown Horror episode, that in the beginning scene, after Georgie dies, they do the funeral and everything. Bill, he's looking at the photo album, then he sees Georgie winking at him, throws the book on the ground, freaking out, and then all of a sudden the book opens up and then goes to Georgie's picture. When it goes to Georgie's picture, all that blood oozes out, and then you have that weird music, dun 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 dun. You know, it's supposed to be suspense. But that was creepy as fuck. That was pushing the envelope back in the day for TV. It was to the point where they almost scrapped the whole movie because they show that blood scene. Yeah, right? I'm thinking, shit, all the stuff they show on TV now with The Walking Dead and everything, that pushed it, you know, for TV. But honestly, it really did. And I've gotten into a debate a few people about the rated of this movie, because they didn't have this whole rated system shit that they have now, or rated TVPG, TVG, you know, all that stuff. So whatever they showed on TV, they showed it, you know. They just didn't show, you know, nudity, and they didn't say, like, shit and all the other bad words. But anyways, for this movie to actually go and push that boundaries, it's pretty fucking awesome how they did that, you know. Because that scene was... They did a lot of scenes really good, like the main ones, because that made you kind of skin crawl. It made you freak out, like if you look at pictures of past loved ones, you know, because that shit happened. I mean, because then your imagination starts going, which is what I really like about it, right? The fact of, you know, they show Pennywise, but they don't show him all the way. The fact that he comes out and then you see his face, and then it goes to the next shot, and it lets you run wild on it. It really does, you know? And obviously... We've all seen this movie. My generation, we fucking love this movie, you know. Newer generation, they don't appreciate it as much. Not to knock on you guys, you know. They say that it's just, you know, short attention span. And I get it. Okay. You know, I'm not knocking on it. But even the remake, for all what they did for the first one, when they were all children and everything, going through all their struggles, that movie was still pretty fucking long for how they did it. And I don't know if they're going to cut this remake into 2 or 3, but I know the original, they did it in 4 parts, or 2 parts. 4 or 2. I couldn't find anything on my research that said if they filmed it, well, obviously they filmed it all in one shot, but when they released it. I think they did it in 4 because, I mean, each part, if you watch it in 2 parts, it's a 4-hour movie. I mean, that's a lot to sit through, especially for a TV series. And I think they did it back-to-back. You know, so they did it like, you know, on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I think, you know. And for 1990, I mean, it was one of the highest rated movies on TV, or a TV made movie for a while. It really was, because back in that time, I think that was before the TGIF thing, and then that came out and it kind of toned it down and made it for, you know, family viewing is what they call it, right? But anyways, yeah, I just. I'm just lost for words, because, I mean, honestly, there isn't enough good things I could say about this film. Obviously, frog in my throat. Pennywise, he made me float, I guess, you know. But anyways, this movie I really enjoyed. I know everybody else is going to say it's long and drawn out. And the biggest ringer, what's funny about this whole film, as long as this film is, you know, 3 hours, 4 hours, around that mark, you only see fucking Pennywise for 20 minutes. And that was it. 20 minutes, and that was it. If you count it. Because I actually watched... y'all are going to laugh. I actually watched this movie, and I actually timed it. And timed how much he was in the movie. He was only in the fucking movie for 20 minutes. That's horror dedication for y'all. You know? So, yeah. But let me know what you guys think. I mean, did you all enjoy the original one? Does the original one still scare you? I know a lot of people, they have mixed reactions, mixtures of it. You know, some people just like it all. Honestly, I've always loved every horror film, especially anything that has to do with clowns. I mean, come on, killer clowns, right? You know, especially fucking Stephen King, you know, one of the living horror legends, still around, still kicking. You know, I've always appreciated it. But I want to hear your guys' thoughts, you know, because I know you guys put this as a episode for episode 20. I'm giving you guys a treat for this one because, you know, with Pennywise, he's iconic now. He really is. And because of Pennywise and because of this movie, It, and back to what I was saying earlier, I really did try to do a skit and try to do kind of like a little teaser, you know, holding balloons on the side of a busy street and doing kind of similar like what Pennywise does. But I wasn't going to dress up all as a clown, just go all geared up. But as soon as I even got ready for it, man, woo, all the cops are already over there. So because of this movie, people are dressing up as clowns and doing stupid shit. You know, it started in the East Coast, now it started over here. I mean, honestly, it's just I get it. I mean, people want to be funny, they want to do stuff, but, you know, it's one bad egg that ruins it for all, so that's why I couldn't give you the teaser and everything. But that all started because of this movie, and everybody that was dressed as a clown, everybody all dressed up as fucking Pennywise, you know? And who wouldn't? I mean, Pennywise is iconic. It's to the point where it's so iconic that, you know, you could, out of every scary horror clown there is, everybody remembers fucking Pennywise. The original one. The Tim Curry one, I should say, not the original one. The new one, they did a good job, but it's not Tim Curry. You know, I'm just gonna leave my opinions and thoughts like that. Honestly, I really am. I was raised on watching this original one, and the original one, as a kid, for me, really didn't scare me so much because, like I said, I don't have a fear of clowns. I really don't. I've been around a lot of crazy shit, so clowns don't really intrigue me as far as like being creepy or whatever. I get the meaning behind it, but you know, most people, they're fucking fearful for fucking clowns. They even did a thing on it for American Horror Story in the previous season or this season that came out, you know. But honestly, this movie, can't say enough good things about it. Especially the fact that Tommy Lee Wallace did this without having any knowledge of the movie. Well, not of the movie, but of the actual story. He was going off of just knowing the backstory, like, okay, these are these kids in the 60s. They were all not friends, and they become friends because this one bully kept fucking with them. And there's this killer clown It thing coming after him. And this movie, well, I know in the remake and in the book, they basically describe Pennywise as this creature that had to feed off children to survive for every so often, every 30 years. This movie didn't explain that. They left that mystery in there. And Tommy Lee Wallace, he took that idea from John Carpenter, you know? And my opinion on that one, I'm going to tell you, the less is more. It really is. Because when you have to think about it, like, okay, it's all mysterious. How the hell does this happen, you know? If you don't ask questions and just accept it for what it is, it's more creepy. It's more scary as fuck. And that's what makes this horror film enjoyable. It really does. Obviously, there's, you know, the downside, the talking and the dragging on and everything. But, you know, that's all character development and everything. And I get it. You know, it has to be like that. Otherwise, movies wouldn't be entertaining. We wouldn't fucking get it. So, yeah. But anyways, thank you all for joining me in episode 19. Very much appreciated. My next episode is actually going to be not really an episode. What I'm going to do, because episode 20 is going to be for you guys, I'm going to do the top 5 movies that were voted or most requested for episode 20. It's going to be a special episode, and then at the end I'm going to give you a teaser / trailer of the final winner, because you guys still have to you still have time to vote. Let me know your favorites, because I know there's a lot of good ones out there. There really is. I'll get more into that later, you know. Obviously, I'll release videos. I'll hit you guys up on my Facebook, on my Twitter. If you haven't followed me or subscribed, go ahead and click to subscribe, click to like. Let me know in the comments still your favorite horror films, because there's a lot of good ones out there that I've been enjoying. So, But I know the original It was one of the most requested ones, and I wanted to give you all a treat, let you all know and enjoy that one. So thank you for tuning in for episode 19. I'll see you on the next special episode, all right? Take care.
Bow down to the